his way to Florida. He left last night, I believe, about 8 o'clock at night. Where does he look like he's at, Abe, right now? Do we have a tracker on him?
Looks like he's pretty far in the wrong direction, I'll say that.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me. Well, I guess Jimmy's not going to find his love for a little bit. Jimmy, if you can hear me and you're watching the show, you better turn around. You're going in the wrong direction, fella.
Hey, but he's coming to Florida where it's the best.
Before you know it, Jimmy will be punching someone in the stands and killing them. I want to welcome author Dr. Feiler. How are you, sir? Thank you for joining. Am I hacking your name yet? Did I destroy it yet? Because I'm known for that.
Yeah, it's Feiler, but I appreciate you having me on.
I know, I appreciate having you on. And you're on our first show. My partner, Jimmy Farrow, has moved to Florida.
Don't worry, you butchered my last name, too.
I do know. But that's the way I like to say it, Danielle. But this is Danielle's first show as co-host. She's been kind enough to join us. So you're really on the initial show with Monty and the Petro. You see? Doesn't take long. I'll get it.
It used to be Petro to him.
Yeah, well. You could call me something else then. We'll fair it, even it out. So I'm going to call you DR because I just kind of dig that. It's kind of cool.
Sure.
So
Sure.
DR, you've got.
I like that.
You wrote a few books here. Gorp the Grappler, which has been sitting on our table here for a very long time. Son of the Blackbird. The Hangman leaves him hanging. Ambush at the Palace. What made you realize that writing books was something you wanted to do?
You know, I've pretty much always had three interests in my life: music, politics, and writing. And sometimes they cross streams, and other times not. I grew up. I'm 53. I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, where I'm talking to you from now. So this is the Florida show, I guess, tonight. And so I grew up with championship wrestling from Florida and Georgia in the 70s, and that's always just kind of been a backdrop for me, and it's made it way into my fiction now.
That's very cool. That's very cool.
There's nothing like curling up to a good book, right?
No. Tell me about it.
I'm honestly, Dia, what would you recommend me crawling up to when it comes down to my reading material?
Well, I'd recommend starting with Gorp the Grappler. It's a fun, quick, easy read. My hope is that for real fans of the old territory days of wrestling, that it will ring true. You'll recognize. It's a fictionalized version of the Florida territories from the 70s, but that it'll ring true, that it'll sound right to you, that it'll feel like the wrestling that you grew up watching. And the basic story is the idea that first came to me that became this story is there's an alien invasion of Earth. They're going to take over the Earth in a kind of stereotypical Mars Attacks kind of radio
He doesn't love that.
This one alien, though, he starts listening. They're monitoring our radio and TV and everything, and he starts listening to the wrestling broadcast coming out of Florida, and he doesn't understand our culture because he's an alien. And what he thinks he understands is that the world champion is going to be coming and wrestling and defending his title in Florida, which is close to where his alien invasion force is. And he gets it in his mind that the world champion of wrestling is synonymous with being the world champion of Earth. And he thinks, well, it's got to be a lot easier than this whole invasion that we're going to do if I can just go beat this guy in hand-to-hand combat. And so that's kind of the conceit of the novel, and then it follows his path to become the world champion wrestler. And along the way, he figures out that it doesn't mean what he thought it meant, but he's still into it and still wants to pursue the title. So that's the basic story, and it's a good starting point.
Does that alien eventually become Matt Riddle?
He had to go there, didn't he? He
had to go there. I had to. Why not?
He is an extraterrestrial. I'm telling you, that man is out of this world.
In many ways than one.
Many ways than one. Good. No, I take that back. Just bad.
It was actually one of the things that I had fun with this story was the idea that, that there's so many kind of oddballs in wrestling that an alien could kind of fit in, and people would just kind of go along with it and accept him as one of the group.
I really love the concept, though. It's really a really good concept. And the one thing that I really found great about it, it didn't have one loquacious in the entire book, so it made it much easier for me to read, which was pretty important.
Yeah,
I love his extended vocabulary right now.
Oh my God, well, it's nothing like the initial show, baby.
When in Rome, or Tampa, Florida. You're actually the odd man out tonight.
I am.
Even your original co-host is on his way to Florida.
Listen, if I could get out of here, I would. Trust me, I've been trying for a long time.
I think his books, though, listening to how he's describing them is honestly, especially with what happened with the whole, there are such thing as aliens. Good timing.
It is.
I love science fiction. I'm a big science fiction person.
It's funny, given the headlines.
The beyond.
Given the headlines lately, I actually had the thought when I was first working on this book: is science fiction going to be passé by the time it comes out? But
no, you hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah. And
You're trending.
Tampa's the main setting for these books. They cover Florida. They go all over Florida because it's about the Florida territory, but the territory is based in Tampa.
So are you warming up to me right now? Because you're saying, I'm a Tampa girl now. I love my Tampa.
Yeah, honestly, I think people who are from Tampa, who live there, who are familiar with it, there's things that they'll get a kick out of. I hope, with all the settings. I'm based in Tallahassee. There's a lot of stuff that happens here that that again, I think people familiar with these areas will recognize, particularly from the 70s.
One thing I found interesting also is you mentioned before politics, wrestling, writing, music. You had your own record label?
Yeah, I have. Well, I'm involved in a couple different record labels, actually. One of them is called Panhandle Punk Productions, and I played in punk bands growing up in North Florida in the 80s.
I love punk.
And I've got a partner who really heads up this project, who a few years ago, he kind of went from being a record collector to more of an historian, an archivist, and he really wanted to figure out how to preserve the memory of this stuff. And so in 2018, we put out our first record. It was a compilation of punk bands from Tallahassee from the 80s. We've got 4 records out now that are all representative of that time and place, underground and alternative music from the Florida Panhandle in the 1980s. And we've got a lot of other projects associated with it too. He hosts a website, a Facebook page. We're looking at even maybe doing some museum installations and things like that. So, the coolest thing about it to me has been not just that, people our age who remember it and get and are appreciative of us doing it. That's great. What I've really appreciated is that there is a younger generation, people my kids' age, people in their 20s in college, who are discovering this music for the first time and who didn't know about it and who are really getting into it. There's one of these folks is a college student who became aware of the first record that we put out, and he's actually working now on a documentary about the punk scene from Florida, at that time. So that's one of the projects. And then the other one, Sounds and Voices Media, is the label that I have that both my books and soon music will be coming out on that label as well.
Now, can I ask, what bands do you have signed to this label?
Well, the first one, it doesn't operate like a normal record label would, because really the purpose of it is to highlight music that, you know, from this older time period. So we're not signing new bands and putting out new music. It's like I said, it's really more of a kind of an effort to preserve this history. And then with my other label, Sounds and Voices, that's mostly going to be at least initially a vehicle for my own music, but I may expand it out at some point. So so they operate a little bit differently than a traditional record label would.
DR, I'm going to make an assumption here. I'm assuming you're a Star Trek fan, right?
You got it.
Okay. I have a long argument on the show, and we're only talking about the original series, okay? So we have to stick to the original series. What was the greatest Star Trek episode in the history of Star Trek, according to DR?
In the original series.
The original only.
Yeah. You know, interestingly enough, the first one that comes to my mind is the pilot, is the Captain Pike episode. That would be a contender for me. The other one would be the Pon farr episode when Spock went back to Vulcan and ended up in the hand-to-hand combat with Kirk.
Okay.
Those are the two that come to my mind.
The argument I've always had with my partner, my favorite episode is the Savage Curtain with Abraham Lincoln. He says it's the worst episode in the history of the show. Where does this Savage Curtain rank with you?
Oh, it's definitely not the worst. That's a great episode. In fact, if I remember correctly, I want to say, and you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say that Harlan Ellison, who's a really famous science fiction writer, wrote that episode. I think it's certainly considered one of the best by many people, and I would definitely be on your side on that one.
Well, you see, thank you. Now you proved my point, right? So now I'm a happy man, right? This has been an ongoing argument forever.
Wait. I remember my favorite episode, but I don't know what it was called. It had like little tiny fur things that were everywhere. What was that? No, I'm dead.
Yeah,
that would be. Go ahead,
It was called Trouble with Tribbles.
That was my favorite episode.
Yeah.
See, I can be a nerd too. I know this stuff.
Yeah, but Daniela, I got to be honest with you. That's considered one of the worst episodes of all time.
I've done worse things.
Than play with fribbles or whatever they are.
You know, as a kid, the Gorn episode was a biggie for me too.
Oh, of course, Gorn is the one.
Yeah.
But you know,
Yeah.
but again, I got to go back to the Abraham Lincoln one. I mean, that's help me, Spock. One of my favorite lines of all time.
Yeah. That's a
Daniela, what do you got, buddy?
I'm not talking anymore. You just said I had the worst episode. I really did. That was one of my things. My grandfather loved Star Trek. So whenever I would go and spend like the weekend with them or something, he would always put on the old school. Because I think it was my generation was who played Data? What generation was that of Star Trek?
That was Next Generation.
So that was my genre.
Yeah.
That was my genre. But my grandfather loved the old school Star Trek, and the thing that he would always put on right before I went to bed was an episode. And that I remember seeing it because I was like, "Oh, these little fur babies, and like they're everywhere. They're all over the ship." And, that was the one that stuck out the most to me. I was like, I just want one so bad.
What's amazing to me, DR, is that you could mix these two genres, I think, is lack of a better term, and put them into books. It's pretty amazing.
Would it really be that interesting? Wrestling and aliens, because I feel like he did it. He hit the nail on the head. Like they feel like they go hand in hand.
It's like I said, it really seemed like a pretty natural fit once I thought about it. The part of it is, one of the good pieces of writing advice I got somewhere along the way was, if there's a book that you really want to read and you can't find it, then you should write it. And I guess that's kind of what I did. There's not a lot of great wrestling fiction out there. There's some examples. Chad Dundas wrote a book called Champion of the World that I think is really great. There's some other examples out there, but the only other science fiction wrestling book I have found is by an author named Z. Jeffries, and it's called Pro Wrestling Saves Earth, which is a fun read too. But there's not a lot out there. And so I figured, write what I want to read, and that's what I did.
Growing up in Florida, watching wrestling, what turned you on to wrestling? Who was the first wrestler that you saw that all of a sudden you garnered your interest into wanting to be part of this sport? And we'll call it a sport.
Yeah, Dusty Rhodes is definitely the answer to your question. That was certainly the first wrestler that really captured my imagination. I really had the good fortune, I think, of growing up in the right time and place to, for wrestling, getting to see, Ric Flair, Harley Race, Jack Briscoe. I really enjoyed, by the way, your Barry Windham interview the other night. I don't know if you can see it, but the poster hanging behind me is from a show in Sarasota, I would guess in the late 70s, early 80s, but Barry Windham is the headliner on the show. And then Kendall Windham is actually on the undercard. I don't know if you can see that at the bottom.
Yeah, I could see it. That's an incredible looking poster too. I loved it. So I'm glad you enjoyed that interview. Barry Windham, one of and being a Northeast guy, he still falls in my top 10 most favorite wrestlers. Incredible talent. I really wish he could have done more up here. I understand why he didn't, but yeah, I got to tend to agree with you. Thank you. Rock and wrestling, or let's call it punk and wrestling. Did you ever think about combining your musical interests instead of that rock and wrestling deal in the 80s, doing a punk and wrestling deal? Because obviously you're into the punk rock deal.
Yeah, I've thought about that a little bit. I've got one song that will come out that is tied in with the books, so it kind of goes there on the connection between. I don't know if I'd call the song punk rock, but everything I write musically is pretty stripped down, straightforward rock and roll, if not punk rock, hard rock. But yeah. So I've thought about that for sure.
Again, I want to remind everybody watching the show right now, we've got Gorp the Grappler, the Grappler Chronicles, book number 1, which is then, I believe, followed up by The Son of the Blackbird. Am I correct? Book
That's right.
Number 2.
Yep.
Where can we get these books?
Really, anywhere books are sold: Amazon, Google Play, Kobo, Apple, Smashwords. Pretty much anywhere you want to buy a book online, you should be able to find them.
So we're going to hit you with something, DR, with something we call the Pharaoh's final question, but clearly the Pharaoh's not here. So my wonderful co-host is going to ask you a final question. I don't know what she's going to ask you. It's unscripted. She may ask you about what you're drinking. I have no idea. But Daniela, the Pharaoh's final question.
Whoo! Honestly, especially I'm a music person. I'm sorry I couldn't really hold my weight with the Star Trek. With your music though, and I was listening, do you think you can hear one of your songs? Because I feel like AEW and WWE has what's Rhea Ripley's and them's little blend. Can you see one of your songs, that theme song for those combined wrestling teams, that darker? I know you say it's rock, but rock and punk kind of go hand in hand in a sense. I feel you can one feeds off of the other. Can you see maybe one day one of your bands, one of your babies, getting to that next level of being the theme song on one of these big time groups, these dark lords, these inner beings, so to speak, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see that. It would be great. There was a, there's been some great songs used in wrestling, Motorhead songs, and other songs like that. Yeah, I could see that, and hopefully one of the songs that I'm working on now could end up in that category. But that would be great.
Well, again, I want to remind everybody out there, Gorp the Grappler could be bought at Amazon. Just go to Amazon, type in the name, get it. It's an excellent book. It's been sitting on this table for a long time. I read it on the beach last year, and I loved it. And most recently, I've gotten the next two books, Son of the Blackbird, which I'll be reading shortly, and then again, Ambush at the Palace. DR, I want to thank you for joining us. Our first initial episode of me and Daniela doing a show together. It's been great meeting you, and you're a pretty impressive human being. Very, very well-rounded, for sure. Much more well-rounded than I am.
You took the words out of my head. You did.
Well, I really, really appreciate you having me on. Like I said, I've enjoyed the show for a while. You guys made the comment when you had Barry Windham on, you talked about when wrestling was really wrestling, and that's what it's about for me. That's really what I love and what I hope I'm kind of bringing out in these books. So thanks for having me on. I've also noticed that you've had the book on your desk for a long time. Really appreciate that, and all the best with your new co-host.
I appreciate that, and much respect goes out to you. Thank you again for supporting the show. And if I could say this, if your goal was to show your love for those three things that you love the most, music, writing, wrestling, sci-fi, I could tell you, reading this book, you accomplished that mission. Very enjoyable.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
All right. Best of luck. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Daniela, what did you think of that interview? What did you think of DR?
He got me wanting to get a book. I'm going to get a book.
Well, that's the idea.
I know. I'm not going to lie.
That's the idea.
He got me hook, line, and sinker. I'm like, okay, I'll read.
I'll
pick up a book.
I would never think you were a sci-fi person.
Oh my God, I love sci-fi. I do. That's, I guess, that inner nerd in me. Like, I definitely, because the Tom Cruise, all those, I love just knowing that there's something bigger beyond our earth. And like, I don't know. I am into that stuff. I do like it.
I gotta say, knowing you for this time now, it does seem like you really do enjoy your life. Would that be a true statement?
I mean, yeah, of course. But with a lot of people, I feel that when you say, "Are you living a happy life?" I am living my best life because it is my depiction, my book, and I'm writing it.
Wow. Well said. You've been watching Long Island's #1 pro wrestler podcast, Monty Nefaro. Catch us on the Monty Nefaro YouTube page, the Monty Nefaro Facebook Live page. Hear us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Anchor TV, channel 115 every Tuesday, and channel 20 every Wednesday. Daniela, you want to give another shot as episode next Thursday? What do you think?
Yes, Captain.
There she is. I want to thank you. We'll see you next week. We love you all. See you next Thursday, 9 p.m. Monty along with the wonderful Daniela Petro. Send us out, Daniela. Thursday. Send us out, boss.
See you next Thursday, guys.
I'm having one in fact with Monty Nefero, and I'm going to put him in a crossface chicken, and he's going to go down right now. Yeah. Great job, man. Thank you so much.
There was a big story about your claim that you made a man disappear after an attempted rape on your person as a teenager. Did you realize how public this was going to get with it in like police involvement?
No, hell no.
The police show.
This life is tearing me apart. This life is tearing me apart. Remember when I was with you? Love was all we really knew. I saw the beauty in this world all around me. And I've tried to understand. You know, I've done the best I can. I miss the love that once was there.